Global Indian Network, print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Parenting to me isn't really a tick box list of things that you're meant to do. For me, as I've become a parent in the last 5 years, it's about, without meaning to sound selfish, it's not about my child, it's about me. But actually, I've got to check myself first and foremost. And that can sometimes be missed in the whole parenting game. It can sometimes be missed in the game of life, actually.
Hey, welcome back. My name is Rajan. I am the Chief Explorer for the Global Indian Series, the official platform for people of Indian origin, because let's face it, we are everywhere. As you know, every Wednesday we plunge into the human experience of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and take on the big discussions. We are now also officially a award-winning platform. I know, I feel the applause. I'm pretty happy. So, as you know, we have incredible guests on the show, from royalty, heads of state, billionaires, activists, actors, entertainers, criminal gang members, through to those on the fringes of society right the way across the globe. But in this episode, we bring to you a clinical psychologist, but not any clinical psychologist, but Shabnam Berry-Khan. Now, we stay in England and take a deep dive into parenting, immigrant trauma, through to the lighter side of what's it like to be her. It is actually a phenomenal conversation that almost feels like a cup of garam chai on a cold winter's evening. It's that good. So I really hope you do enjoy this session. And if you do, and you want to get involved, it couldn't be easier. Simply all you have to do is go to our website, which is www.globalindianseries.com, where you can see the entire repertoire of conversations so far. I really hope you enjoy this session, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to our dear supporters and sponsors, many of which you'll hear from soon.
Hi, my name is Divya, and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Hello, my name is Daniel Trasa, and I'm Dean of Nova School of Business and Economics in Carcavelos, Portugal, one of Europe's leading business schools. I'm proud to be of Indian origin, and I invite you to discover these podcasts, which will look to redefine the impact that Indians and their descendants are doing all over the world. In behalf of Nova School of Business and Economics, I wish you a great 2021.
My name is Chitra Stern, and I am a proud Global Indian Ambassador and CEO of Martignal Resorts and Martignal Residences. We pride ourselves on the journeys that define a community, and our developments bring people together. Did you know that over 70,000 people just like us call Portugal home? The Global Indian journey has brought people together in a meaningful way, and on behalf of all of us at Martignal, we want to thank you for joining us in these remarkable conversations. We look forward to seeing you here in Lisbon post-COVID. Have a great day.
And just move. Get up 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 and just
Insight into human behavior that's deeper than most. And what's really interesting, the other side, we're all parents. So then all of that is thrown out the window. So, what's it like for you right now? Because you're dealing with COVID, parenting, a whole range of different things, and your profession.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think it changes every so often, depending on, kind of what angle I'm thinking about, what's going on in the world, etc. But I suppose and also what's going on in my internal world, that makes, a big difference as to how I see myself and how I relate to others around me. And I think I suppose ultimately I come down to being a bit of a mix of contemporary and traditional, maybe. So yes, you say, you know, I'm a doctor of the mind, but most people assume I'm a medical doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. Even
But you're
my
brown.
5-year-old,
You're
I
brown.
know.
What's wrong with you?
Only three, right? When I was growing up, you had to be one of the three: doctor, lawyer, accountant. I was none of those. So immediately, am I a failure? Am I not doing the right thing? What was I thinking? Trying to be a psychologist. The bottom line was I wasn't bright enough to get into medicine. That's the bottom line. But it was one of those best things that ever happened to me. Didn't realize it at the time, but kind of get it now. So I'm a clinical psychologist. That is that's what I ended up doing. And that affords you a doctor title at the end of the day, which is
I know we're being very trivial about it, but you're actually very good at what you do. So it's not the fact that you're just a clinical psychologist. You are probably the clinical psychologist out there.
Oh, well, that's very kind. I don't think it's true, but then that's imposter syndrome talking. Which we clinical psychologists are very good at, recognizing in ourselves. For me, the reason I suppose I got into clinical psychology is sort of the reason why I'm doing case management in a way. I think it's all about potential. It's something to do with recognizing or wanting to get the best out of people. And psychology is one really good way of doing that. And I don't think it's a surprise then to hear that when I qualified as a clinical psychologist, I wanted to work with children and families, because for me, that's like getting right down into the sort of preventative, early intervention element of the lifespan, getting right in there and being able to say, right, okay, how can we make this child and this family function well enough to be able to allow that child and that family to flourish to the best of their abilities?
Here's a question. You're obviously a clinical psychologist. What does that mean when it comes to parenting?
Oh, it means very little. It depends, actually. As I'm talking to you here, it means a lot more than when I'm out there with my actual child. I think you said it a bit earlier on in our earlier chat. It goes out the window because ultimately it's all about emotion.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've got an intellectual element to my being, and that is what shapes a lot of my understanding of parenting and how I support and think about my child's development and how to get the best out of her potential. But there is also something alongside that is called, emotional intelligence. Some people call it emotional literacy, attunement. That's all very emotional. That is based on how what is going on in front of you makes you feel, and how you then use that emotional motivation to say or do what you next say or do. And that may be stronger than the intellectual part of my brain that says, oh, you need a reward system, or you might need to take some time out right now, and other parenting strategies that we all know and love, thanks to Super Nanny. But it is for me, it's all about, really, it's managing me. Parenting to me isn't really a tick box list of things that you're meant to do. For me, as I've become a parent in the last 5 years, it's about, without meaning to sound selfish, it's not about my child, it's about me. But actually, I've got to check myself first and foremost, and that can sometimes be missed in the whole parenting game. It can sometimes be missed in the game of life, actually, because it's your fault that I'm the way I am, or it's your fault that this situation happened. Actually, check yourself. What did you do that contributed to that situation? And so the idea of mindful parenting lends itself very well to this idea. So the idea of being in the here and now and trying not to be clouded over by the thoughts and feelings of work, or that argument you had, or I've got to get the dinner on, and other pressures of life. It's about being able to say, right now, in this moment, the only thing that matters is the situation that I'm in with my child. How do I sit with the moment's need, which is pure of anything else that's been going on today or maybe going on tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's a real trick. That's really tricky. That's really hard. But weirdly, completely linked to culturally our brownness. It's also linked to yellowness as well, as we know, in terms of, Buddhist thinking, etc.
Let me get my color chart out right now. Which degree are we on here?
Yeah. But the white people, the whiteness, it's a relatively new concept in modern contemporary parenting.
Yeah.
But it's not something that really is too, in theory, it's not too abstract for our cultures and ancient ideas of being in the moment, and allowing that to constantly restore the balance and challenges that life offers. And it's no different to parenting. It's just applying it to another very tricky, particularly in COVID times, although this week, of course, schools have opened, thank you, Lord. And so, back to, in theory, sort of back to normal. But yeah, it's, I think there's never been a time in my life ever, other than in this, because of COVID times, really, where I've really thought about how I'm really relating to my child, or in some cases not, and getting it very wrong. We do, hand up, we do also get it wrong, even as clinical psychologists, because we are human first and foremost. We're not this sort of calculate your brain into, I don't know, Webster Stratton parenting or positive parenting technique, and suddenly, ta-da, you know. But people think that. They do think that. I remember when I was pregnant with her, with my daughter, the teachers at the school I was working at, oh, wow, you're going to be the best parent ever. And I was thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. How can I be the best parent ever? Oh, but you get on so well with the children. You understand them. So yeah, they're someone else's children. They aren't, I
because you have a different bias, haven't you? When you're looking at somebody else's kid, you can almost see it, but when it's your own, there's emotions, everything else, and then there's the
healthy distance is a beautiful, healthy thing. A bit of distance, which is really hard, particularly when I think about how I was parented. So close to the parental bosom that I couldn't breathe. It was really hard to just be whoever I was going to be.
How much of that do you think is cultural then, and how much of it is based upon the experiences that our parents came into? Because obviously it's when our parents came to UK, it was a very different country. Brexit was wasn't even there on the books. It was tough. You had racism. You had a lot of, I remember my father was telling me about the signs that were on the shops that he saw. And obviously he had a turban, so that made it even harder.
Oh gosh, yeah.
How much
visible?
Of it is visible. So how much of an impact do you think that had on, that first gen or second generation kids coming in? And do you think that's now an autopilot within behavior, the way that we then tend to parent? Because monkey see, monkey do.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I think on a very basic level, trauma, which I think some of our parents, possibly our grandparents' generation, depending on what age you are and who your audience members are. But for me, I'm my parents came to this country in their early 20s. One from Pakistan in Pakistan at the time, but he was in India when Pakistan was being partitioned, and I think he was maybe about 8 when that happened. Massively traumatic, and you don't. Most people don't necessarily know this. I suspect your audience probably do, but a lot of people don't know that was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, mass migration. In world history. I mean, not just of that era, in world history. And what was striking to me about it was that it was in a relatively short space of time. So the impact of that, I think, is felt so much more than a migration that happens over years and years. Because I was talking to my dad the other day, and he was like, "Oh, no, it was, you know, he can't even relate to how hard it was. He can't even tell me." He says, "Oh, you know, you just got on with it." I'm thinking, really? But you know, the people in Yemen, now that's a real crisis. And I'm thinking, I think that's been happening for years and years and years and years. And I'm not belittling or taking away from experiences, but there was something, to me, as I understand it, about the concentration in time as to what happened India-Pakistan way, and that has to go somewhere. And I'm a big believer that we somatize a lot of our trauma. I don't think there is probably anyone I know, certainly as an adult, who has had, say, serious health conditions, particularly chronic health conditions, that can't relate back to a traumatic experience or set of traumatic experiences in their life. So, you know, my one parent came from, you know, new Pakistan, and the other came from Kenya when things were happening there in the 60s.
Whoa. Yeah, because that was a very different Kenya, wasn't it? So they were escaping on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And my mum was quite young then. You know, she was without her parents, actually, for from what I understand, from most of her teen years, and or rather from her mum, and then gradually the family moved from Kenya to the UK and settled there. But she, you know, in dribs and drabs. So she was unparented from 12, 13, something like this. You know, my nana, he was around, my grandfather was around, but he was busy working. Someone had to put food on the table. My mum's job was therefore to do something with that food and the household, to keep it in some kind of order. So she stopped going to school. So you could argue she may not have had the intellectual resources in the same way, say, you and I might have, going to university and living an easy, relatively easy free life. And she certainly didn't have any emotional support to then come to the UK and almost very quickly get married and have to work out what this game of life is all about. So trauma on lots of micro levels, as much as political trauma and the reason for leaving, etc. And then you've got my dad, and it's no surprise then that my mum, very classically female, wanted to hold her children close to her. You know, never really worked the moment she found out she was pregnant with my brother, my older brother, and didn't go to work after that, after having her 3 children. And the idea of dissociation and how it's hard to manage the traumas of your life and then be able to give everything that you've got to your children. Actually, she didn't have a lot to give to us. And so a sense of shut downness really was, I realise now, I sense from my mum. And what that meant for me is that I was constantly trying to get her attention, constantly. My dad, on the other hand, I was also trying to get his attention because he was so bloody busy. You know, 3 blimmin' kids now, and a wife who isn't going to work because she should, you know, be at home looking, you know, very traditional sort of setup. But he was very stressed. You know, it's not easy. I mean, I don't think we could live a life without 2 incomes, to be honest with you now, but I know it's a different financial, you know, situation and cost of living and all that kind of stuff. But he took on that sort of authoritative parenting, which at times I would argue was probably abusive, because actually he has cut off to what was appropriate levels of communication now with his kids. And so what we were left with was physically present parents, which is yay, a bonus, but emotionally unavailable parents for different reasons. And so we didn't get to understand or have our emotional world as we understood it externally, and how it reflected on us internally, mirrored in any way. There was no sort of teaching, and I don't mean emotions are about this, you know, Shabnam. I mean just through living life and seeing how people carry themselves and how they're engaged and how they're able to connect and attune with those around them. Very little experience and knowledge of that. And that's led to lots of subsequent and consequent feelings, guilt and shame are massive in our culture, and with that a sort of sense of punishment or lack of self-compassion, you could say, because we may not know that we deserve it, or because, well, our parents just got on with it. That's what we're always told, to get on with it. Shut part of your brain down, continue that sort of trauma presentation, you could say. And actually, that's not how to play the game in this day and age, I don't think. People are interested in customer. They're not just in, that makes sense. It might be a bit of a jump ahead in terms of how my brain is thinking and picturing this. But it's all about the softer component of relating to one another. I have zero experience of that, and I'm making it up as I'm going along.
Are we catching up to where the UK was, or has the UK just literally shifted in that direction? Is it the case that as children of immigrants, we're now acclimatizing to the countries that we now call home? Or is it the case that actually the whole of society shifted? It's almost taking this step forward where, men and women roles have now slightly changed in terms of psychology. We're a bit more of an empathetic society, although some can argue that we kind of lack a lot of empathy now because it's almost catharsis with everything else. But what do you think it is? Is it the fact that we're now starting to glide into what would be perceived as being normal? I know that's really tough, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think in some sort of way there is a shift across globally, if you like. Certainly in the psychology world, the idea of compassion, the idea of managing this sort of communication style that can be more critical, and it doesn't get the best out of you, actually. What is important is you'll often hear people talk about kindness and loving kindness and concepts of, like I say, mindfulness, which fosters all of that stuff, which again, you could say is a new age way of thinking, and certainly in psychology it's considered a new age way of thinking. But us brown folk, we knew about it years ago.
No,
what are we doing? But somehow we've forgotten, because life has happened to us as a whole, and in a way we've not gone back a little, in a weird sort of way, we haven't gone back to our roots and reconnected with what made us great in the first place.
The roots that we're trying to associate ourselves with right now are culturally devoided of that type of closeness, because we're only going back to when the immigrant experience was, and facing the harshness of that. And then we're saying, but that's who we are, that's our traditions, that's our cultures, one has to behave that way. But we forget those were under circumstances, not because of inherently what we think of and how we believe as the 50 shades of browns out there.
Yeah, I
know we have this discussion. Is one of my bones of contention is there's a lot of new age, whatever it's called, but there's a lot of these life coaches. Now, you have all these people that are coaches, transformational coaches, we're parenting coaches. And one thing that I like about what you do is actually steeped in real education. It's not just a weekend course that you do over coffee with whoever it is. Yours is actually credited study. And if we were going to place a great reliance on the integrity of the professions, you've actually studied, test an example of that. But now you got these people coming out with a 2-day course, and they're playing about with your brains and your minds in the new neuro-linguistic programming part 5 type of hypnotic suggestion stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Like, from your professional companions, sign me up. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that...
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think it's important to be able to distinguish the two. I think there is an element where society and some people who need support can probably just need a little sort of superficial, don't need to scratch too much below the surface. That's probably enough. But I think the majority of us are made up of we are our life's work at the end of the day. Everything I say and everything I do today is pretty much been shaped by the last 40 odd years. You can't scratch the surface of that and understand me, my motivations, my values, what my purpose is here in life. And while there is a lot of language that fits that in the sort of 2-day course type, coaches, I think where psychologists come into their own is that they're able to bring they're able to formulate who you are as a person from, you know, your very earliest life experiences, which you can't get away from. So the moment you think it doesn't matter about all that baggage, I just kind of put it on the side. No one ever puts anything on the side, okay? It's always with you all the bloody time. And actually what you need, what really gets to how you move forward in life is not to say drop the baggage, but actually to acknowledge that baggage, to say this baggage is part of who I am. How can I maneuver myself around the obstacles of life with this baggage alongside me? If you are denying yourself that baggage, and psychologists would help you not to deny it, but not be burdened by it either, you're going to be able to maneuver in the best way possible for you. That potential that I mentioned earlier is more likely to be realized, because you can't get rid of your baggage. You are what happened to you is not your fault, you know, in the good and the bad. I mean, it wasn't anything to do with you. You were a product of your family, your upbringing, which is a massive part, and it becomes a blueprint to who you are. If you're not going to touch any of that, you're not going to really get to the crux and the long-lasting crux of what the issue is and how you can sustainably move forward in a new direction that fits you, wholly fits you.
Wow. Okay, so what forms identity then for you? Because you're saying obviously what happens in our past when we're growing up is going to be stored somewhere for the good, the bad, the ugly, everything else along those lines.
Yeah.
So what creates somebody's identity? And how does that...
I thought you said this was only half an hour. I'm going along a half an hour. Yeah, well, it's a mix and a melange, if you will, of all of the different things that make up who you are, you know, and what you've attended to. And that is going to be different for different people. So there are going to be people out there who've had parents who have given them a very rich sense of life, not just Maslow hierarchy. I put food on the table,
yeah.
clothes on your back and a roof over your head. What more do you want from me? You know, these are the people who've managed to expose and allow their children to experience the other layers. I mean, self-actualization is a beautiful thing to try and achieve, but I don't know many people who are there. But you know, it's all a goal, isn't it? It's an aim. I think understanding your purpose in life it transcends all those factors, good and bad, that have made you up today.
Is that a real thing though? Is having a purpose a real thing? Because it's obviously our own mindset saying, this is now my purpose based upon the experiences that I have, the exposure that one's gone to, and what I tell myself on a constant basis. Whether that truly is my purpose or not, I've got no idea.
No, well, that's it. But it's an experiment. Life, you know, there isn't, a book on Rajan and a book on Shabnam, and then, you know, the moment I'm, able to read, I flick through it and go, oh, that's what I was meant to do.
Isn't that astrology or something, or astronomy? No, wrong podcast.
Yeah, I heard your book's in the publishers right now. Coming out tomorrow on Amazon. But it's about really being able to, one thing that I think our parents have been less good at, they've been amazing at many things, but less good at reflecting on what they are really here for. I think they were so basically sort of
in the transactional model.
Yeah, absolutely. They had a job to just keep everyone alive. That was their job, to keep them and the people around them alive. And what that then has meant that and I see it a lot in the male part of our older generations, very little sort of self-reflection about that. And I don't mean in a theoretical we should all think about this and we should all do this. Actually, this is what it means to me. I wish I had done this a bit differently. I'm so glad I did this in this way. I didn't know it at the time, but it worked out all right for you. It's all chance-based life. But actually now we have the intellect, in theory, the stability to be able to say, hang on, what is it that I am doing, and what benefit, if I'm just reviewing every X period of time, whatever feels right for you, depending on what your goals, but it's got to hang together as a neat picture. It's not just about being shit hot at your job. And, you know, for me with PsychWorks, my service, running with it, because I can tell you now, my little girl will struggle with that. My husband and I will probably end up divorced. My father, who lives with us, will probably not quite have the lovely twilight years that he was expecting. So that's not my purpose. My purpose is to be, I mean, for me, I've got it written up here. I can be more present. What was it? Yes, I want to run a sustainable service, fit in with my family's changeable needs, and contribute positively to my physical and mental health. I can then be more present for my family, for my clients, for my colleagues, and for myself, which will feel like life is more balanced and enjoyable. I literally got it written up here. That's what I'm looking at. Blue skies thinking. No. But it's, for me, it's about, because I know that when I'm smashing it at home, the chances are, because of a all-encompassing purpose, I'm also probably going to smash it good enough. I'm not talking massively, but good enough at work, and good enough in relationships, etc. Because it's a transferable skill in that sense.
It's our personal expression. It's something that you said beautifully earlier, whereby, you know, you can't escape from your life's work. You are the sum of your life's work. That means every single part of you, every single day, whether it is sitting in an office or on a flight or speaking to somebody or parenting, that is you. That is your circumstances in this planet. And then it's your personal expression. What do you choose to do from that? But I guess where you're coming at is that most people need to turn the switch and say, think about your life as your personal expression. What is it that you feel is so deep within you that you think, this is what my world is now going to be built upon, rather than being the transactional model, which is what our parents went through, rightly or wrongly, because they had no choice. And for your side, like fleeing from partition, for one, that is tough. And then what happened in Kenya, another one. So that in itself has a lot of cultural baggage on there. And now also then you're the sum of your experiences. You think, well, this is normality to me. That normality for somebody else may be extremely different in different pastures, but no, that's wow.
And it you can see in the sort of subsequent generations after those kind of experiences that some are getting it and others aren't. I feel like there's a real sort of split. I see it in my own family, and I don't think that's necessarily a boy-girl split. I think that is, you know, just some people kind of work it out and other people don't, and when they don't work it out, it's really detrimental. They aren't able to flourish in every aspect of their life. I know some people who are just they've done so well for themselves financially, which is the parental, you know, purpose. Got good money, very good, you know, good salary, six figures or whatever. That's amazing, and I'm really happy for those people, but they might still be single and they really don't want to be single. You know, they might not have any hobbies and friends, and all they do is work all day.
I tell you what, you wrote a fantastic article that came on, and it was on the website itself, the Global Indian series. And I thought it was really interesting, because then what happened after that, I know you're talking about COVID and the impact it has on Asian cultures. Maybe let's just quickly jump onto that for a second, just to round it off. How do you think COVID has impacted the South Asian community?
I think it's been a real, really tricky time for us brown folk. Certainly I have felt it in terms of, I suppose, still having quite a lot of family around, extended family. I don't mean necessarily in my home, although actually, as it happens, I am now living with my father. So it became quite a big thing. Like when we were living, just the three of us, my husband, daughter and myself, in London alone, just the three of us, it carried a different meaning. Now, I'm living with, my father moved in with us. We moved house and we're all living together now, which is an amazing thing to be able to give him. But at the same time, it's now come with a lot of worry about him being elderly, what that all means, how we're going to deal with things. We've become so socially recluse as a result. And it doesn't make sense. We're not designed, as humans, we are not designed to deal with traumatic, stressful situations on our own or in little pockets. We need to reach out, we need to get help. And actually, as a culture, that is kind of our usual way of dealing with things, you know, sort of that collectivist sort of approach, really. And so it feels very unnatural to not be able to say to my dad, you know, why don't you go over to uncle's house and chill out with him for a bit, because see, you're a bit bored, and I know, for example, I'm not going to be able to hang out with you this evening because I've got a meeting or whatever. You know, that's a very small example of the kind of things that I think have impacted.
It's our sense of connection, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then how that then impacts on that sense of loneliness and loneliness in a crowd. You know, everyone is, I mean, this isn't particular to you know, us brown folk, but I think it carries an added weight for us brown folk, because we're not used to being on our own, I don't suppose, you know, in terms of that, if you want to think about it as intergenerational sort of experiences and epigenetics, and you know what our genes expect, you know, need to how environments it triggers our genes and all that kind of stuff. Well, there'll be a role of natural surroundings, if you like, and how that impacts on our generally our mental health.
What a fantastic conversation. I'm sure you agree. She is such a great person to have on. Like all the guests, highly unique, and she is the story. If you'd like to find out more about the work that Dr. Shabnam Berry-Khan does, all you simply have to do is have a look at the link in which you're reading and listen to this podcast on, and you have all the details there. Well, until next week, when you join us back on the voyage for the Global Indian series, I hope you have a very safe week ahead. And thank you for listening in. I love what we do. And I'm going to ask you a favor. If you love it too, get involved in our work. Simply subscribe to our platform and also share your story. I would love to hear from you, because ultimately together we are building the world's greatest living encyclopedia that plunges into the human experience of what's it like for us all. Until next week, take care.